Good evening. This is Channel 17 Town Meeting Television, and tonight we are doing one of our candidate forums, candidate moderations here. And tonight, my name is Howard Wooden, by the way. Tonight we have two gentlemen who are unopposed for the South Burlington School District. I want to introduce both of them and then give them a chance to introduce themselves to you. Right here, this is Brian Minier, and he's running for the third-year term, and to his right is Martin LaLonde. Did I say that correct, Martin? Yes. And he's running for the second-year term. Martin, I'm going to start with you. I'll give you a couple minutes. Sure. Tell the South Burlington citizens why you wanted to get into this and why you want to be a school board member.
Right. I think it's more of not quite yet getting out of this because I've been on the board for 9 years.
Wow.
And I'm running for the 2-year seat. This time I've run for the 3-year seats the last 3 times. So the main reason I'm running again is for having continuity on the board. I've been involved in a number of negotiations over the last 9 years, and next year will be a very interesting new negotiation because of how the state is taking over negotiating health insurance. So I wanted to certainly be able to help with that. And also, we've been looking at what to do with our infrastructure, this master planning and visioning for, it's been a few years now. It started looking at the elementary schools and what to do there. And then over the last couple of years, we've turned to really looking at the middle school and high school to see what kind of infrastructure improvements we need just to bring these 50-year-old buildings up to snuff. I don't think that's a technical architectural term, but, and also look at what kind of changes can be made to the buildings to help our further our education of our kids, because the way we educate kids are a little bit different now, and our building, like I say, was constructed 50 years ago. So those are things that I really want to see through, and after 2 years I'll have to decide if I will be coming back yet again, but hopefully in the next couple of years we'll really have dealt with some of these issues that I've been dealing with for a very long time.
Yeah, 9 years, quite a ways. Brian, what about you? What's your interest, and why are you going after this unopposed even? You're already, why would you like to do this?
Well, I have to say hi to the kids anyway, because they're off there behind the cameras watching. And they are the biggest reasons that I'm doing this. My son Ivan is 13. He's an 8th grader at Tuttle. My daughter Maisie is a 9-year-old 4th grader at Orchard. And my wife, who's also back there in the darkness of undisclosed age, was also a product of Orchard, Tuttle, and South Burlington High School back in the day. I married into this. I'm a Flatlander. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. My wife and I started dating in '91, which is the first time I came up to South Burlington, and came up a couple times per year after, and in the late 90s lived just a few blocks from here in the Old North End on Manhattan Drive. Oh, yeah. After which she and I went to graduate school in Madison, Wisconsin, both for Slavic languages and literature, and both our kids were born while we were out there. And just through beautiful serendipity, she got a job teaching Russian at the university in spring of '10, I guess it was. So moved back to South Burlington, very pleased to be able to do so, very lucky. And have had a great time here since. So just the opportunity now that my kids are a bit older to be able to do something for the schools that I have really had a wonderful experience in, and for the community too. So.
Brian, have you ever been on a board before? Is this your first experience being on a school board?
It is my first one, yeah. And first big volunteer experience too, I would say. Yeah. So I coach my daughter's soccer team. I've helped out a little bit in Orchard, at the book fair, at the school play, but this would be the first time doing anything of this size.
Given the fact that you're going to be fairly new to the board, and you've got people like Martin who have been on there for now 9 years, yeah. What do you think you're going? How are you going to approach your first year or so on the board? Where do you see yourself?
Well, first of all, learn a lot and ask a lot of questions from my colleagues, for whom I have a lot of respect, and I've been very impressed with how the board has been doing its business. On the financial side of things, the jobs that I had after graduate school at the Medical Foundation in Wisconsin, at GE Healthcare, I think gave me a good familiarity with databases, spreadsheets, working with these kinds of ideas. So on the financial side, I think I'm on firm footing. But I actually think the more important part is the skills that I acquired during my academic time, learning how to consume a lot of information, dissect an argument, figure out what you want to do about it, and present it in a way that people can understand. Sort of show your work, as all of my math teachers said over the years. In terms of what I'm most interested in, I think this is sort of in Bridget Burkhart's wheelhouse, but I'm also very interested in the master planning and visioning and sort of what the facilities look like over the next few years, how the city center development and the basing of the F-35 change things,
Right.
hopefully not too much.
Right.
And so I really want to get in deep on that if I can without stepping on Bridget's toes. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Martin, when you talk about negotiation, what has been your role in the past in past negotiations? Have you been heavily involved in the negotiation process as a board member? And what do you see for the future? What do you think is going to be going down, especially with those changes in the state?
Right. I have, and for most of the negotiations, the whole board is at the table.
Yeah.
This negotiation session, which we started in November, and last negotiations session a couple years ago, we had a negotiating subcommittee, and it was the chair, Elizabeth Fitzgerald, and I 2 times ago, or not the current time, because this current time I've just been supporting that somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, with a teacher negotiation, we end up at a point where the whole board is mediating or negotiating. So,
Mm-hmm.
so been involved with that, and but there's also other negotiations we do. We negotiate with administration, with administrators, which I've not been part of that team, but also with the staff, and I've done. This is the 3rd time that I've been on the negotiating subcommittee
Yeah.
for staff. So,
That's great.
so there's been a lot of negotiating. It's a really big part of the job, and not necessarily the most fun part, because it is an adversarial process often. But that's fine. Yeah, the teachers, the staff, the administrators, though we sometimes have tough negotiations, I think we are compensating our teachers and staff and administrators very well, and for a reason, because we have excellent teachers and excellent administrators and excellent staff, and that's why the school district does so well. It'll be interesting next year, I mean, because the way we've negotiated in the past, it's a complete compensation package that includes salary and benefits, and all of a sudden the state will be telling us what one of the most important benefits. There are other benefits that we still have on the table, so it will narrow what our negotiation is, and I'm not sure how that's going to go. We'll see. It'll be new.
Yeah, it certainly will get complicated, I think, more complicated than it has been. And I want to remind our viewers, though, that you can call in a question at any time. The number is 862-3966, and we'd love to take any questions that you have, and these gentlemen would certainly love to answer your questions. Right before this forum, we had the South Burlington school budget presentation. I want to start, Martin, you're on the board. I'm assuming, and maybe wrongfully, that you support that budget.
No, absolutely.
And I want to get also Brian's view on it, and what you think are the highlights or the things that a viewer should know about it from a board's purposes.
Well, I think the key point is that it will continue to offer the programming to meet our students' needs. It will continue to provide, I think, the exemplary education that we provide that the community expects. It will continue to provide opportunities for professional development for our teachers to make sure they continue to be some of the best teachers in the state. So it does all those things. It also does the necessary facility maintenance that we need to have as we're waiting for master planning and visioning to tell us what else might be done. So I think it's definitely going to keep our public schools in South Burlington being top notch. And yeah, there is an increase in the budget, and there is a slight increase in the property tax rate, although it's still lower than it was a couple years ago. I think that the board and the administration really, in the budget they present to us after going through a citizen advisory process, we're looking at the bottom line very carefully, but there are a lot of cost pressures that are out of our control, including health insurance increases, the need for facility maintenance, additional needs that we are covering with our students. The student population that we have, there seem to be a lot more behavioral issues that we're having to deal with in the school. And all those things cost more money, but I think our community expects the product that we're producing, and we're doing it in a cost that so far they've been able to support.
Brian, you're new to this. What do you think about this year's budget proposal?
Absolutely support it. I first started following the school board more closely about 5 years ago when there was a proposal from the superintendent to put the 5th grade elementary school kids in the middle school. Started paying attention then, and after that time, started attending more school board meetings, had the chance to see budgets developed. And I have to say, I've been impressed with the job that they've done. I don't see any profligacy in what they're doing. The negotiations, as far as I can tell, have been hard-nosed, as evidenced by one strike, by an imposition. I mean, it's, you know, there's not a lot of fat there. And so I think you also need to take a look back at the long-term perspective and say over the past 10 years, the average annual increase has been about 2.2% or something like that. This is not huge, especially in a community, as Martin said, that values its education so highly. The other thing to remember is whenever a budget is built, as I understand it, you do it from the ground up. So nothing is grandfathered over from the previous year. There's no extraneous stuff that could be cut out. You say, do we need this year? And I think if you look at what was put forward this year, you know, maybe 80% of the budget is baked in the form of salaries and benefits. And so what you really need to look at is, okay, what's being added? And you look at the additions to this year's budget, and to me, they all seem quite defensible. It's access for kids, so it's adding 3 FTEs for early elementary education at Central, or it is changing the 9 para-educators to 5 special educators to better give access to our kids with special needs. There just isn't a whole lot there that you can take much issue with, I don't think, once you get into sort of a line-by-line look at it. So, yeah, I think it's a great budget, and I think it's well done.
And as we start to look ahead at, as Martin was also talking about the facilities, and you start looking at your plants, what do you think are the capital needs and various things that are going to be popping up that you anticipate the school district is going to have to deal with? And
yeah, so some of this is near term, and you can see that covered by the bond that's going to be on the town meeting ballot. Yep. So most of that bond, I think about half of that bond, is for upgrades to Munson Field, which if you've been to a game there and the weather is cold and you have to use one of the porta potties, you would probably agree that improvements could be used. For longer term, it sort of depends. I mean, we're still waiting to see exactly how City Center is going to shake out and what that's going to affect, how that's going to affect Central. We're still waiting to find out about all of the noise measurements from the basing of the F-35 at Burlington International. Does that change Chamberlain meaningfully? It may. I have been impressed over the time that my kids have been in the district by how much people value their neighborhood elementary schools and what a sense of community is built around them. And so partly to preserve that feeling, but partly just to be fiscally prudent, I hope that we can just improve the facilities that we have to get them up to speed for 21st century learning. I do not want to see, if possible, consolidating into some large, mega elementary school off in the southeast quadrant. Okay. So.
And Martin, what do you think? What's your perspective now, taking a look at facilities in the future? What do you anticipate?
Well,
especially you were talked about the educational changes that might be.
Yeah. So, when we looked at the elementary schools and whether to consolidate, ultimately we decided really where we needed to put our emphasis and our money was at the high school and middle school. We thought we'd get more educational bang for the buck by investing in those schools. So we've been working with an architect that also has a lot of expertise in school construction, have built or renovated schools in Vermont and Massachusetts. We have a group of individuals including teachers and staff and community members, a board member, administrators who have been looking at this issue with the architecture and their experts as well. So we've been looking at what we can do with the high school and middle school, and we're going to have a number of options which will be presented and we'll be looking at more closely. And what we'll be looking at is, again, all right, if we invest in a certain thing, what is our educational return? What is the return as far as just the school learning environment for our students? And that's the kind of things, it's sometimes a little hard to really understand those benefits, but we want to, as clearly as we can, kind of match the benefits to what the cost is, and then determine how to go forward. Because it's going to be substantial. It'll be a substantial bond. that over the next couple of years, I would imagine, we may be asking the community to support. But the buildings they're a little bit tired. They're not, they do need some work, although it's not just the buildings really that creates the culture of the school. I mean, it's the students, it's the staff, it's the teachers. So I think it's still a very vibrant community, but we could certainly have a upgraded facility.
Well, and the thing, I really was impressed with the idea that you, instead of saying facilities or buildings, you used the term infrastructure, which I thought was great, because I think that is kind of the way we need to start looking at it. It's not just buildings, it's the infrastructure all the way through. And that to me seems like a change in the approach, as we're not just looking at facilities, we're looking at the entire school system. You know, we're trying to see how this all coordinates together. It's very impressive, I think. You know, this is going to be a little controversial, but it's one of the questions, and I wanted to talk to both of you a little bit about racial bias and those things that are happening. You know, the state, I think, is still dealing, and we're continuing to deal with a lot of those issues. And where do you think South Burlington stands, and where do you think they can be going with this? I'll start with you, Brian.
I mean, it's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was about half a year ago, we were looking at one of my wife's old pictures from when she was in Orchard Elementary School, and we compared it to my daughter's picture from her second grade year, and the difference was right there. You know, the community has become more diverse. And I'm glad to see that reflected in what's happening in our schools. I mean, it's being embraced early on in elementary school by having days where you celebrate different cultures, the kids do posters about their countries, there's different food served. And so just at that low level, it starts happening. And then as you get up into the middle and high school curriculum, I do believe it's being addressed more in language arts and social studies classes, this notion of diversity. What does it mean? Why is it important? And just recently, obviously, the choice was made by the student, I think it's a Justice Union now, it was the Student Diversity Union, to request the flying of the Black Lives Matter flag. The administration and the board agreed to that, and I agree with that decision. I think it's important to have these conversations. I don't think you need to see that choice as a political one, but rather as an issue of civil rights. You can say, it's Black History Month, but this isn't just history, right? These things continue to happen, they continue to happen, and they're affecting what's going on right now. So I think the issue of racial bias is a real one. I hope it's being mitigated and mediated somewhat just by the fact that we're becoming more diverse and more aware of these issues. But I'm very glad that the students brought this up and that the board and the administration supported them in wanting that conversation.
What do you think?
Yeah,
You went through that whole, you know, change of things, so you've seen a perspective from a board.
Yeah, and we started really seeing this a few years ago, that this was something we needed to do, and it really started with retiring the Rebels name, you know, respecting the alumni who were Rebels, but understanding going forward that it was no longer appropriate. And that really came, I give the credit to our administration and the students. I mean, the board, the way we work, our policy governance is what it's called, is we really defer to the experts, the administrators in the school. And they were saying, for instance, that the Rebel name was not working. It was excluding students, it was making students uncomfortable, and we fully supported that change. And I think the next step, and this really, the Student Justice Union has really been driving this. And it's great that they have been really trying to include or have better inclusivity and an understanding of the historic implicit bias that we see. So we have staff and teachers being trained. We have implicit bias training, so it's really trying to build the understanding that there are these biases. And that we need to deal with them to have as an equitable offering to our students as possible. And we will continue to look at this. It is a statewide issue, and I know that the House has passed a bill that is going to create a group to help come up with inclusivity, ethnic diversity curriculum, and trying to have us understand that there are more stories than what we've been telling and explaining over the past decades. So that will be an improvement as well. That'll take a little time, but
Sure.
it's something we're dealing with, and I think we recognize it, and we are trying to improve the situation.
What's interesting is that unlike almost the rest of the state, South Burlington's school population is either continues to go up or at least level off versus the rest of the state, which seems to be in somewhat of a decline for students. So what do you attribute that to?
We're very fortunate in that way, that's true. Our population is increasing somewhat, our student age population too, and so these forces that you see in other parts of the state to consolidate schools, you really don't feel them here. And partly it's just such a vibrant, interesting community, lots of fun stuff to do. I mean, there's a reason my wife and I were delighted to come back here. It's partly because she's from here and partly because it's a great place. And so you put that together with job opportunities, the best schools in the state, and you have a critical mass and people want to come here. And I'm glad it is sparing us some of the pain that you're finding elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, people are coming to South Burlington in part for the schools that we have. And but also there's a general demographic trend of urbanization, and the rural schools are where we're suffering the biggest decreases. People are moving to urban areas, including South Burlington.
Where they have the infrastructure.
Where they have the infrastructure, yeah, where they have the offers, where we have the opportunities. And that's a big part of it as well, is that we have the critical mass to have an excellent offering to our students.
What do you anticipate 5 years from now? You may not be on the board anymore, but where do you see, what are going to be the issues that you think this community is going to have to deal with in 5 years?
I think we see some of the same trends already. We've been dealing with, I mentioned behavior issues.
Yeah.
I think it's more of an understanding of ACEs, and I'm going to probably forget exactly what that stands for. Adverse Childhood Experiences, that's what it stands for. And there's increasing awareness of trauma and how it affects children. But there's also, and this has been a trend for a while, and I see it continuing, that we need to educate to the fullest extent every student that comes through the door. Mm-hmm. It's not like it in the past where students could find a manufacturing job or could make a living. Right. We need to get them set, it can be a vocational job, but we really need to pay attention to every student and maximize their opportunity and ability. I don't see that all of a sudden changing in 5 years. Mm-hmm. I will think that by then we will really be hitting our stride as far as personalized learning plans, proficiency-based graduation, all these initiatives that have been starting over the last few years. Our first class that will be graduating on proficiency-based graduation requirements will be next year. Yeah. But there are kinks to work out on that, and I think in 5 years unless the state has completely changed what they want us to do.
Never know. What do you think, Brian? You may be on the board.
I may well. I hope to be.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I like that in the school's ends, what they ask for the students to achieve, that you talk not just about what are the skills, and yes, that's part of a personalized learning plan, but you talk about the whole student, like a disposition for lifelong learning, what kind of a citizen are they going to be, and so you're kind of doing things on both ends, right? You're trying to get kids in when they're 3, 4, 5 and doing the early education. You're trying to open it up as widely as you can to people with different abilities and make sure that everybody gets the best education they can. And then you're trying to turn them into a person who can not only find a job, but who has meaning in their life and who can help their community. So I love the way that it's designed. I agree with Martin that the PLPs are a work in progress. It was a little bit bumpy when we had our first meeting with our son's teacher too, but it does seem to be coming together. I like the idea that you're measuring actual skills that students can produce rather than, time that their butt was in a seat.
Right.
I'm very hopeful. I really think the district is on a good course, and I hope to help it continue. I didn't come in with an axe to grind or anything. I want to help the good work continue.
I'm going off book a little bit because I think you guys can help me and others understand why can't we keep graduates here in Vermont after they graduate from high school? What's it going to take for us to bring kids back from college and to bring them and make that move that you guys came back to and set up shop again and do it? What do you think is going to?
That's a very good question.
You do a great job up to grade 12, and then.
Well, I think it's important to try to have opportunities for kids coming right out of college. I'm more focused on trying to bring families back,
Right.
like Brian came back when they have children. If there are opportunities in Vermont to have students stay here, that's great. But I'm not trying to tell my own kids that you need to stick around. It's like, go out and find yourself in the world, but come back when you have grandkids for me. So I think that's so I don't consider that a huge problem, frankly. I mean, we do need to work on our workforce, and that's a whole other separate issue. And we do want to be very attractive to have families, come back to Vermont.
We've got a couple of minutes left, or less than a couple of minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to leave, the citizens? Any final statement you'd like to make?
So before that, which I will get to, just a quick follow-up on Martin's.
Good, yes, please.
When I talked to David Young a couple of days ago, one of the ideas that I talked to him about that I was most excited about is this big picture project they have at the high school. It's the only one in the state where kids, I think just in the last 2 years, can partner with local companies like Logic Supply, there's an industrial design firm, and they can have almost like an internship experience in high school. Get great skills, possibly have a job lined up afterwards. I think that's one way you keep people around, is get them lined up ahead of time, like make a pipeline to these local businesses. Yeah. So that's one thing I'm super excited about. In terms of a sum up, I am just pleased to be given the opportunity. I love how the schools have been running. I want to keep them running well. And yeah, just kudos to the board, and I hope I can fit in and do my part. That's all.
Yeah. Any final statement?
Well, it's been a privilege to serve for 9 years. I'll look forward to at least another couple years, and I really appreciate you having us on.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome,
Yeah,
and it's been our pleasure to have you. And so I want to urge voters to make sure you go out and vote on Election Day, and that Channel 17 will post this this forum on its website, and you can find this and many other forums on the Channel 17 Hometown Television website. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.